Winter is lingering, and so are all the questions about the disposition of the property on the Hampshire site. Can we get seated? Okay. There is an envelope being passed around. Mary Lee, where are you? There you are. Okay. Please put your $8 for breakfast in that, because we are charged the $8 whether you eat it or not. So we request that you pay $8 for breakfast this morning. We are having a very exciting program today, but before we start, Jeff, would you like to give your tidbits?
I'm sure you've all been missing me with my tidbits, and obviously the crowd is due to my tidbit. Actually, it's sort of appropriate today because my tidbit sort of relates to the subject matter today. And it involves how we name our neighborhoods and where we live in our four-part community, because I include Roy Neck as a separate community. And early on in the 1900s and the late 1800s, you couldn't protect your property, or developers couldn't protect their property from commercial, so we had covenants and restrictions and subdivision maps. And so we had things like covenants and restrictions that cover big, large areas, and it said you couldn't build a slaughterhouse, smith shop, forge, furnace, bread, starch, vitriol, bars, all of that kind of stuff. And then we filed subdivision maps in order to protect large areas from, if you came in and developed a large area, you didn't want somebody to build a glue factory next door to you. So we filed subdivision maps, and most of these good historic maps were filed between the 1870s and 1930s, because in the we didn't have zoning until about the late 20s. And zoning was thought of as a taking, unjustified taking of your property. On the other hand, the U.S. Supreme Court decided in the late 20s that the health and welfare was more important than the taking of property. So we had zoning. But before then, we didn't have it, so we had these big subdivision maps. And of course, the most famous map in our area is the map 610 in the Manor. Right, Bubba? Right. But the interesting thing about this is what gives you a right to Manor Park and to the beach down there. But what people don't know is that, somebody comes in and buys a house down in the fancy end of Woodbine towards New Rochelle, and they're not really in the Manor. Anything west of Beach Avenue is not on map 610. You're not in the Manor. So tell all those real estate brokers that. That's actually Woodbine Park map. And that's how the little park at the end of Willow, which is not really Willow Park, is Woodbine Park. Because that whole area, Kane Avenue and so on. Another interesting area is Addison Street. Some of you might remember a local attorney named Jeff Young. His grandfather was J. Addison Young, and he filed a subdivision map, hence Addison Street. We have actually Larchmont Village has several other maps. They have the Pryor map, which is all that Pryor Lane area. They have Woodbine Park, Flint, which is all the streets around Flint Park. They have Larchmont Shores, which is Spanish Cove. And they have down at the end of Pryor Lane, the last little Schaefer subdivision. Now, somebody from Larchmont, let's say, who's from, the mayor? Former mayor. Okay, so if I took you to Mamaroneck and went up Mamaroneck Avenue and I told you to go to the Heights, describe where you would go. Up Mamaroneck Avenue towards White Plains, towards the waterworks. No, you would go to the right. Because the subdivision map is on the left, the higher area is the Knolls. And on the right, it's the Heights. See? You learn things? We have a lot of other interesting ones in the town. We have Larchmont Gardens, which is, where the 5 roads come in and you have the stone pillars. That's Larchmont Gardens, and it covers a pretty wide area. In Mamaroneck, we have Rushmore, Heathcote Hill, Grant Park, Fenimore, Washingtonville. Actually, Fenimore Road is Grant Park Avenue up at the top. It's not Fenimore anymore. The other interesting one is Rookin Glen. Anybody know how that was named? Seems sort of an odd name. All the real estate brokers want to sell a Moody house because there was a famous builder up there, C.W. Moody. And how that got built is that he did a subdivision map, and he and his wife were on a train in Scotland. And they ran into Rookin Glen, which is the largest, most beautiful park in Scotland and rivals Central Park in New York. Even today, if you go to Scotland, go to Rookin Glen, but that's how Rookin Glen got named, because C.W. Moody and his wife were traveling in Scotland. And we come to the area which is more appropriate today. There are a lot of little subdivision maps out in Orienta. A lot of them have the name hummock on it. And these are, how did that name come about? It's really a fishing hummock. And at the end of Delancey Cove and at the end of Pirates Cove, you have these little subdivision maps, and one of them is actually called fishing hummock. And so we get to the subject of today's, which is actually Hampshire Country Club on the old subdivision map was not Hampshire Country Club. It was the Hummocks Country Club. And with that, I lead us into our program.
Thank you, Jeff. We learned a lot. Now I'm going to give you Janet DeMacy, who's going to introduce the program.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
There he goes. Okay. Okay, Hampshire Recreation, which is the owner of Hampshire Country Club, is here today. Okay. Hampshire Recreation, is that better? Owner of Hampshire Country Club is here today to discuss their latest plan and vision for the country club. Hampshire is represented today by Dan Pfeffer and Susan Goldberger, as well as David Cooper from the law firm of Zarin Steinmetz, and Michael Younghans from the engineering firm Kimley Horn. They're going to discuss the application for development that has been submitted to the village of Mamaroneck. In addition, they will discuss the secret process as well as other alternatives that they have been requested to look at by the village of Mamaroneck as part of the environmental impact study process, which is ongoing. And this includes the original proposal for the development of condominiums on under 2 acres of the club. For these scenarios, they will address the potential impact on schools, traffic, tax generation, and flooding. Gentlemen, please.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. First of all, I just learned a lot, by the way, about the whole Hummocks history. And I also think that if you track it back far enough, I think some of the original land from Hampshire Country Club was actually donated to the Hummocks School. Is that correct?
It belonged to the town of Mamaroneck.
Okay, well, I'll keep that myth anyway. But well, thanks for having us. And first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. I don't know how many of you are suffering from the Olympics hangover last night. It was, I have a young son, he's 17 years old, and he loves watching snowboarding, so I had to stay up and watch the snowboarding last night, so if I sound tired, I am. Just a little history about Hampshire. So in 2010, the Hampshire Country Club was facing bankruptcy. We acquired it right before that happened, and we made a pledge to keep it open, but we did things a little bit differently. We started with the philosophy that if you're smart enough to answer this following question, we'll take you as a member. The question is, are you a nice person? If you say yes, you're in. If you say no, well, you're not in. That philosophy that has really been maintained since we acquired the club. We are the home for instance, the Mamaroneck High School golf team, the Rhinebeck golf team. We are the home for groups like At Home on the Sound every year when they do their annual fundraiser. We also do a lot of work with groups like Ronald McDonald House, where we give the patients and their children, and their families, the opportunity to kind of forget about what they're going through, and we invite them to come in and really enjoy themselves. And the list of things that we do really goes on and on and on. During Sandy, we opened up as a shelter for people. especially a lot of the college kids that were doing their applications for admission to schools. After about 2 years of ownership, we embarked on the idea that we wanted to start with a planning mission to look at what we thought we should develop or could be developed on the club property. So we started with this idea, let's see if it can actually fit, it does, that we wanted to preserve as much open space as possible. And we wanted to deliver something that we really thought was missing from the community. The idea came up that we should actually start thinking about adding condominiums to the clubhouse. When you live in an environment like this, we understand that it's such a terrific community that you want to stay here forever. And we started looking at opportunities to actually help and encourage that. And that's how we came up with an idea to do a condominium. The site plan that we created really involved lopping off two elements of the existing clubhouse at Hampshire. It was the men's locker rooms and the women's locker room. And the idea was that we should expand. And I don't know if you guys can see that in the back. If you can't, it's actually in your slide package that we handed out, because we recognize that it might be a little difficult to see some of the boards. I'll let you turn to that for a second. So we have two elements of it. So we have the men's locker room, which extends down to Cove Road, and we have the women's locker room that extends down to Cove Road as well. What we wanted to do was to pack it full of amenities, and those amenities include a private screening room for the members. You get 9 or 10 of your friends together. Somebody recently thought we were building a Cineplex Odeon on the site, but we're not. This would also have a private lap pool for the members as well as the condominium owners. It has a meeting room where you can invite some of your colleagues in to come have some meetings inside. Really everything you can think of. This was actually modeled out of a project that we built, which was a Ritz-Carlton residence, which was the first Ritz-Carlton residence with no hotel. Cove Road would get extended out about 75 feet or so out from its current location, out towards the golf course. And as some of our members were relieved to hear that we would actually be shortening one of our holes, which they tell us is way too long. And the idea really is that there would be very little disturbance on the property. This portion of the development covers about 2 acres. So the question became, what happens to the rest of the property under this scenario? The answer was simple. We would give up our development rights forever. The development rights would be placed with a trust. So we could never go back and say, hey, we want to develop more. No developer in the future would be able to come back and say, we want to develop more on this property. Recently, we've been out talking to people because we know that things have changed dramatically within Larchmont Mamaroneck, as we all heard the news that the schools were overcrowded. And we had a lot of people that came to us and said, you know, we really love the idea of your plan, but we don't like the impact that it could have on the schools. So we came up with a solution which we think really helps, which is, why not just make it an over 55? Make it an over 55 community that would have absolutely no impact on the school district. And so we are actually going to amend our proposal to include that. The other thing we heard was that people were a little concerned about the cars that come through. I don't know if many of you know, but the roads that start at the gate of Hampshire, Cove Road, which kind of wraps around to the end of our property over here, Eagle Mills Road, is actually private. But we leave it open, and there's a lot of traffic that comes through, especially during the hours of pickup and drop-off over at Hommocks. A lot of people use it as a cut-through. So we also are going to include a bike lane, a bike path, which would go from the entrance of our property all the way down actually to the Hommocks School, because we own the other side of Eagle Mills Road onto our property. So we thought that was a decent way to approach that as well. And again, this came from a lot of listening tours that we've done. So what does it look like? As you drive into Hampshire, this is what you see today. This is the entrance. You come around our circle and you see the clubhouse. The men's locker room actually comes around to the right side here. And this is what it would look like from a rendering perspective from a condo, for the condo plan itself. You can see there's a French influence, low roofs. the height would be no taller than the existing clubhouse. And because of the topography, you wind up with a taller building towards the road and a shorter building up towards the front of the porte cochere at Hampshire. This is the current view from the clubhouse. Sorry, from the golf course itself. This is the what they call the ladies' card room, which is not that beautiful. And to the left of the ladies' card room is actually the loading dock. This is the deepest part of the property, and you'll see we actually get the height, although it's no taller than the clubhouse, which is on the other side of the building itself. Although this is not the most recent rendering, after doing some additional work, which Mike will talk about in a couple of minutes, regarding floodplain, we've actually elevated the condominium building a little bit higher. So actually, it's 1 floor shorter. So it's at most 4 floors in the back, 3 on the front. Starts in 2, 3 on the front, and then 4 in the back. From a tax perspective, actually, thank you. Tax generation for the property would amount to about $3 million a year. Total school taxes would be about $1.5 million, although we think those numbers are a little bit underestimated based on some additional work that we're doing right now. With school costs of about $317,000. This was originally, the school tax numbers were originally done when we thought, based on the Rutgers method, that we'd have about 20 students at the condominium. Assuming that it's over 55, we assume that the total school taxes would probably equate to just about the full net school taxes for the property of about $1.5 million. So I'm going to let Mike Youngins, our lead engineer from Kimley Horn, take you through the, what? Yeah, no, that's what he's going to do. Okay, Mike is actually going to take you through the PRD plan, which is the subject of the submission, and he'll be discussing that with you. This is the as of right plan, because just for a little history also, when we originally submitted our plan to the prior board for the condominium plan, it wasn't entertained. So there was no discussion. We came back a second time and actually reduced the number of condominiums, and that wasn't entertained either. So where we are today is we have just recently made and filed our as of right plan, which is for a combination of single family and carriage homes or townhomes. I guess carriage homes are a fancier way of saying townhomes. So Mike, I'm going to let you take them through kind of the engineering behind the plan. I know there'll be a lot of questions about flooding and what have you.
Good morning. As noted, my name is Mike Youngins. I'm with Kimley Horn. Somebody, you can't hear me? How's that? Is that better? Okay. All right. Practically, I had to eat the microphone. I'm going to go through just the general plan. And when I'm done, if you have any questions, please raise your hand, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. As Dan had mentioned, this is the PRD plan, which is presently the subject of the DEIS, which has been filed with the Village of Mamaroneck. This plan looks at reconfiguration of the site and then the placement of 2 different types of housing units. If you look on your plan in the yellow, there are 44 single-family residential lots that are proposed through the central portion of the site. And then in orange, on the roads leading out from the central core, you have what are called carriage houses, which are townhomes, basically, that extend out from the center portion of the site. Now, when we laid out this site, there were a couple paramount issues, which I don't have to tell anybody who lives in the area. This site is under a potential tidal flood that is fueled by the Long Island Sound. All the water here, the elevations are dictated by what happens in the sound. And as we've seen over the last couple of years, flood is a large concern. So when we laid this out, we kept in mind, first of all, we wanted this to be above the flood elevation, and we also wanted to provide some additional freeboard in the future. As we've all heard, there's a potential for sea rise, storms are becoming more frequent. So this plan addresses all those issues and provides a safeguarded development from any future issues with flooding. Today, the flood elevation, the regulatory flood elevation is elevation 12. The golf course varies in the existing condition today from an elevation of down around 2-3 up to elevations over 25-30. What this plan does is it adds some additional fill and then relocates fill on site to basically develop these development platforms where the buildings will be placed. All the buildings are going to be placed at a minimum elevation of 16. That's 4 feet above the current regulatory flood elevation. So even if we do have some flood rise, we have more than enough freeboard here that these houses will be dry in the future without any issue at all. All the roadway networks are set at a minimum of 14. Again, considerably above the current 100-year flood elevation, which is the regulatory elevation that we need to build by. These roads also provide a connection that does not exist today. Currently, if you're either in the Cove Road or over on Hommocks and a 100-year flood occurs, you don't have a way out. What this provides is a road network over that flood elevation, allowing people from either Hommocks or from Cove to connect out to Cooper at an elevation above flood. So we were very sensitive in laying this out and looking at how this best worked. To place it with that is a paramount concern. Now, when we did it though, we also kept in mind the surrounding golf course. This plan actually preserves 9 holes of the existing golf course in the future condition. The perimeter of the site has a 9-hole course that starts at the clubhouse, works its way around clockwise, and ends you up back at the clubhouse. So all this area around the perimeter is preserved. The majority of disturbance will occur in basically the middle portion of the site where we reallocate and consolidate that fill into this development platform. All the infrastructure here has also been developed with the flood in mind. Our pump stations have the surface above the flood elevation. All the electrical, everything has been considered to be flood-proof, the issue in the future. So this is a very viable and developable plan under this scenario, and then does provide that wonderful perimeter. It should be noted too that in the condo plan that Mr. Pfeffer talked about previously, the same considerations have been included. We have a development platform around this proposed condo approach that lifts it up with the first floor elevation above elevation 16. Again, this whole area is safeguarded in case of a flood event. So both of these plans look at it and are very sensitive to it. We've done flood modeling on this scenario just to make sure that there are no issues with the surrounding neighborhoods. The introduction of this development, as the modeling demonstrates, does not have any impact on flood elevations of the neighborhood. It actually provides a benefit, as I mentioned before, by providing that access out in case there is an event. The perimeter of the site, for the most part, has been kept intact. If you look at on the site, there's a hatching. The hatching shows the areas that are completely untouched. So the vast majority of the perimeter of the site, completely untouched, which means the mature trees stay, and the approach, as you see it today, will remain. Other notes too is that this plan also preserves the current tennis operations, which are located in the central portion of the site. They're just relocated. And then the club will continue to operate, obviously, with the 9-hole golf course, and then any additional amenities Mr. Pfeffer can speak about if needed. Is there any questions on the approach? Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for coming. Can you hear me? Sounds like yeah. Okay. Yep. Then they're going to see how short I am. That's the problem. Good morning. So you've now heard, I guess, two plans that are being reviewed at this point. But let me take a step back and just take you through the procedure and where the village is at with this application. Initially, the condo plan, as Dan had referred to, was presented to the Village Board of Trustees, and the reason why we had to present it to the Village Board was because the existing zoning on the site doesn't permit that type of housing. So we would require some sort of zoning amendment to allow that, so the Village Board would have to be involved. When the Village Board, the prior Village Board decided not to entertain that proposal, we were sent over essentially to the Planning Board to process an application under the existing zoning, which is permitted. And that is what we're calling the as-of-right plan, the PRD plan, which Mike just took you through. The Planning Board is now undertaking the State Environmental Review process, or SECRA, as you're probably well aware of, and has a draft environmental impact statement before it, which was prepared by Hampshire's team, Mike, and engineering and planners, et cetera, which is a multi-volume packet. It's all online. You can go through it, but it's very, very large, 2,000 pages, evaluating potential impacts of the action, the quote-unquote action, which is the R20 plan or the PRD plan. And the Planning Board as a lead agency is looking into whether or not there are potential environmental impacts, and I think Mike took you through some of them, and whether or not the plan incorporates sufficient mitigation measures to minimize or avoid those impacts. For example, flooding, traffic, et cetera. It's all in there. There are a lot of empirical data, expert analyses, et cetera. There is an executive summary in the beginning, which kind of gives you the summary of everything. That's probably the best thing to read if you're really interested in it. It's all online. Currently, the Planning Board is and their experts are evaluating all of the data in that document. Tomorrow night there is a public hearing scheduled. I'm sure everybody knows about it, where they will solicit public input about the findings in that draft environmental impact statement. And then eventually what's going to happen is once all of the comments are provided, there's going to be a court reporter or stenographer there tomorrow night, as well as written comments are being accepted. All of that will be provided to Hampshire's team, which we will take back and then respond to all the comments and then prepare what's called a final environmental impact statement, which lays out all of the potential mitigation measures and ways of addressing the impacts that have been identified as potentially significant. One of the issues that the Planning Board will be, or one of the critical pieces of the SECRA environmental review, is determining whether there are any other feasible alternatives to the proposed plan, which may better mitigate the impacts that are identified. Any alternative must be consistent with the applicant's goals and means, and also must be legally permissible. But it's a way of trying to figure out, well, is there a way of achieving what Hampshire wants to do at the site while avoiding some of the impacts or better mitigating some of the impacts that are identified, flooding, traffic, et cetera. They have asked us, the Planning Board has asked us to evaluate a total of 6 alternatives, and in fact there's a chart which is, I think, in your packet, which summarizes the alternatives that are being looked at and categorizes all of the impact and the magnitude of each impact. One of the alternatives that they are looking at is the condo plan, which is now hidden, but is the condo plan. Of course, that plan wouldn't be legally feasible without a zoning amendment from the Village Board. But there may be an opportunity, of course, to reconsider that. The Planning Board at this point is just soliciting comments. Once those comments are compiled, as I said, then we go back and create a final environmental impact statement. until which point the planning board is going to eventually issue a finding statement, which would complete the environmental review process, where they determine what types of mitigation measures should be incorporated into the ultimate project, what should be the project that the applicant should be pursuing. I think that process is sort of ongoing, and obviously public input is welcomed, and I'm sure everybody is already aware of the public hearing tomorrow night and the public comment period, but certainly helps the board and frankly helps Hampshire as well as we finally make our tweaks to this development plan. Dan, is there anything else, or do you want it to? Okay. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions or bring the panel back up, and so we can start the question and answer session.
I guess I'm a little bit confused about the timing. So the condominium plan is still on the table, but I mean redoing the clubhouse portion is still on the table, or are you shifted completely towards the development?
Well, at this point, the action, the plan that's being proposed and that Hampshire is moving forward with is the subdivision plan, because right now the zoning only permits that type of development. So, however, we have been asked to take a look at the impacts and whether or not the condo plan would better mitigate some of the impacts that are identified. Now, of course, that would require some additional steps because new zoning would have to be in place. So, was that me? No, I'm sorry. So technically, that's not a legally feasible plan at this point. Yeah.
I also want to respond to, I haven't made it a secret that my favorite plan is the condo plan. It's the empty nester. It's the one that I personally believe has the least impact. And we spent a lot of time, and you can tell by our renderings, a lot of thought about what it should look like and how it fits into not only the existing neighborhood, but also fits into the club and the club environment as well. Yes, yes. Yeah, I think there's a second mic. Right? Oh, there it is.
So once you have, in what way, assuming hypothetically you went forward with the condominium plan, in what way would you incorporate accessibility of the community to use of the facilities? What type of membership or what type of restrictions are you contemplating in connection with that development?
Right. From a restriction standpoint, I started out the discussion by saying Hampshire really doesn't have restrictions. If you want to join, we welcome you. We have talked about discounted programs for members of the immediate community, meaning Larchmont Mamaroneck. We've also constantly opened our doors for special events, so the community is included. We've recently talked to someone who I'm not sure they want to be mentioned, who said, well, what about opening up a portion of the property? You guys have a great connection to the Long Island Sound right behind the clubhouse. And we said, what a terrific idea, part of our listening tour. And we said, why don't we jointly build a kayak launch with a kayak storage area in the back? And we thought that was a great idea, and that would be open to the community as well. By incorporating things like the biking path that would go all the way through our property, all the way down to Hammock School, we thought was also a step in the right direction as well. Any ideas you have, we'd love to hear them, as what we've said. Yes.
How long would it take to bring in the fill if you have to bring in the outside? And what would the route be to the truck?
Okay, the question was, how long would it take you to bring in the fill, and what would the route be for the trucks? I'll turn that over to our engineer.
Well, we haven't really defined the construction schedule yet. It would, I would assume it would probably be over a period of 9 to 12 months, and all the construction traffic as laid out in the DEIS are required to come from Route 1, and it would be done during off-peak hours. We wouldn't run anything through the neighborhood. It's all supposed to come down Hammocks and into the site. What do you mean? It would depend, and obviously at this point, we don't know what the source of fill would be. You would have to see what's available at the time. That would all be coordinated with the local town staff to make sure whichever way they came in on Route 1 would be the least impactful, but as close to the site as we can, off of Route 1 down Hommocks. Does that hopefully answer your question?
I would like to invite, as president of the board of LMC-TV and our studio manager, Dina Schumacher here, you can sit at your home tomorrow night and view the planning board session in the comfort that you can DVR it and watch the Olympics, or you can attend personally. But we prefer you to watch it on LMC-TV. And with the hope of not repeating the questions, I'm going to walk around, and whoever you choose, I'm going to have the microphone, because we can't hear the questions on LMC-TV without this microphone.
Perfect. Please.
Hi, my name is Rena Beater, and I'm actually a member of the Board of Ed here in Mamaroneck. I'm here with Sari Winter also, and Sam Orens. So just a few things, because I know, as you stated, that the community has asked questions about the impact on the schools. I know that Dr. Shaps, our superintendent, has sat down and met with you and your team over the past year, and I think as recently as last week or the week before, Dr. Shaps and our board president, Melanie Gray, are planning to attend tomorrow night. So they will have comments on the impact on the schools. And currently, both Dr. Shaps and Mike Colmer, who does some of our data analytics, have been going through the report on the school impact and have a response on what we perceive the impact would be. I don't think it'll come as any surprise is that there's a difference of opinion. So that will be presented tomorrow evening. So thank
Perfect.
you. I just wanted to let the community know.
Please.
I'm a realtor in Sotheby's. I'm also a resident for 30 years here. I've done a number of reservation projects out on Long Island. So one of the questions that I have for the gentleman here today is,
Switch on the mic. Switched off.
all right, now you're tired of me by now. I think that in terms of the schools, it would be great for our community if we had an over 50, if we didn't have more children for the schools. I think that it would be great as a realtor. Also, I know we have a huge need for people to have some housing to trade down to when they don't need large homes and large tax bills. So I'm really in favor of the condominium plan, and I'd like to also see what else it would do for us in terms of preservation and open space.
So in summary, the question is, what is the difference in each of the different scenarios in terms of open space? In the condominium scenario, you can see that the vast majority of the property would be left as open space. It would never be developed. There would be a deed restriction for further development. And we also said earlier that we'd be willing to actually place our development rights with whatever group would like them, whether it's the New York State Trust for Public Lands or otherwise. So just running down the columns that we have listed here, the proposed action has about 36 acres of open space associated with it, and the open space would be the 9-hole golf course. The second is the condominium plan, which my favorite is the roughly 102 acres out of the 106 would remain as open space. We have a number of different scenarios that the planning board has asked us to look at, and on average, it's anywhere from about 40 acres down to as low as about 25 acres. Does that answer your question?
Plan.
I just want to be clear about what the Board of Education rep presented. With the condo plan, the impact on the schools is almost negligible. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. And I was actually going to make that comment, and thank you for bringing it up too. With the condo plan, if it's an over 55 development, we really don't envision any students living or kids living in this condo. It's geared towards adults. It's an adult community. It's tied to kind of retirement living. And again, the idea of making an over 55 community came out of, partly from our discussions with Dr. Schaps when we were talking to him about the impact and the concern about the impact on the schools.
I'm happy to respond.
Yeah, please.
If somebody would like to respond. So I'll just give you.
I'll give you my mic. So you can.
And again, I don't want to steal any of. I don't want to steal any of Dr. Schaps' thunder because he's really had put a lot of thought into what he's going to say tomorrow night. But just as an example, and I'll give myself away here, I could qualify for over 55 housing. I love living in this community. I might not be ready to sell my house right now and move because actually I really want to stay here. So say if I'm a person who moves into this development, my house then becomes available for a family with 3 or 4 kids, which is what we're seeing. Most of the impact that we're seeing is the highest numbers are coming from a number of communities where there's been turnover of empty nesters who are deciding to leave their homes and move to, apartments. This would open up a whole other option for them for more kids to be coming in. So, we do see that as being an impact on the schools. And again, Dr. Schaps will have more data on this, but we don't see this as having absolutely no impact on the schools.
I have a quick question. You speak about Cooper Lane being developed as an escape route or whatever. But if anybody has ever looked at Cooper Lane, it's virtually a one-lane little road with maximum 6 houses on both sides, 2 and 1. I mean, it's a tiny, tiny road that's accessible only from the Old Post Road, which is one way, of course. I mean, it's not exact. It's very hard to see that as a viable route out.
I don't know if I have a response, other than we have looked at it. We've looked at improvements that we could make to Cooper, and I think Mike also has some.
Yeah, we did actually look at Cooper. It's a little off the map here, but actually that last segment from the maintenance building up to the first house is particularly narrow. That would have to be widened out a little bit. And obviously, we don't expect, even in the future scenario, this to be a major access point. We just wanted it to be available for the flooding. It would have to be widened up to that first house. That last segment is only about 15 feet wide, which obviously isn't enough for two-way traffic. But after that point, it does widen out to about 18 feet to 20 feet, which would be more than sufficient for two-way traffic. So we make it that full width all the way into the site. It would be able to handle that capacity.
I believe you stated that the condominiums would be built 16 feet, which is 4 feet above the maximum flood level, if that's the right term. I'm under the impression that the maximum flood level goes up every year. How many years does that 4 feet buy you?
Actually, there have been no new flood maps that have been published at this point, since Sandy even. There have been some draft maps which have been floated, but nothing official. We do expect the next flood map to increase it a little bit, but as I mentioned, this plan takes into consideration an increase in the potential flood elevation, so even if there is a foot or so adjustment, this plan will still be in compliance with those requirements.
I remember that in the earlier plan, there was an issue about parking, and the garages were going to be underwater. Can you explain how it's going to?
Yeah, well, start first with the subdivision plan. All those garages are going to be up. That isn't going to be an issue. All those garages will be up just at about 16, same as the first floor. I think what you're talking about is the condo plan. The condo plan actually has a garage that is subgrade, but the entrance to that garage will be above the floodplain, and the garage will be built, which takes extra construction steps, as a bathtub design that will keep the water out. So even if the flood rises, that garage, even though it's below subgrade, will be dry. And this is a common approach that's used in a lot of waterfront areas. So this isn't going to be an issue.
I just would like to say two things, if I might. First of all, what we have today is a presentation by the developers. And we as a community need to understand that. Their objective, as Mr. Pfeffer has said, has always been and is still to build the large condo development, not necessarily because it's good for the community, but because it is enormously profitable. Because they purchased land not zoned for this, which is why it was purchased at such a low price. And by rezoning, they get a windfall to make, in their own words, profit of $55 to $60 million. So that's what's going on here. And I appreciate the real estate broker views, but some of them also stand to make a lot of money on selling of the condo units. The premise of one or the other, we need to step back from. What the planning board is looking at, and will be discussed tomorrow night, is the viability of this project. The viability of this project leads to then a determination of whether, and if so, what alternative should be considered. The viability of this project, for reasons such as, and I was on the school board myself for years and president for 2 years. So as a school board member, the concerns they have and others go to viability. And you should come or listen on LMC-TV, please, tomorrow night, to the planning board discussion, or they will replay it, and those replays, I will tell you personally, no, and sorry for not laughing, but they are actually very good and easy to watch. And that's what you should be focused on, not the developer presentation, but the true, serious analysis of whether or not what's in the DEIS is accurate, is appropriate, is communicating the issues that allow the planning board to determine the true impact of this project. Because in addition, the issues of the condos are there and would need to be fully fleshed out. Thank you.
Let me just chime in. Obviously, one of the suggestions was to watch the public hearing on TV. I would suggest come to the public hearing and speak to the board, because the public process that the planning board is currently going through is only helped by public input. That's correct. There is a very long and voluminous environmental impact statement that's before that board right now, and they have independent experts that are scrutinizing every single word and every single number in it, but certainly it's helped out by the public as well. I would say that some of the representations that the question was just proposed are really off base and not consistent with what's in that document, and I think Dan is probably going to stand up and talk about Hampshire's view. But at the end of the day, whether one person's view or another person's view is accepted, it's really better if the entire community comes out and speaks to the planning board about what issues they should be looking at. Dan, I think there were some items that you wanted to comment on as well.
First of all, I think there may be a little confusion, and I suppose I apologize for that. When I talk about the condominium, for me, this is my passion. I spent a lot of time, effort, and energy working with my partners to develop something that we think is really beautiful and would fit in nicely to the community. That doesn't mean this is the only thing we can or want to or must develop. What we have been encouraged to do is to actually submit a plan that is as of right, that can be built, which is why it took our engineering team about 2 years to develop a plan that fits into the existing zoning and takes into account everything from traffic to flood mitigation to tax generation, etc. So that's what this plan is about, and that's what we intend to go forward with the planning board. But personally, I still really like this, probably because I'm 1 year away from being an empty nester. And I guess I start to think for myself, where would I like to be? And for me, it would be a wonderful environment to be able to live at a club and have everything done for you, even if you want, dinner last minute coming from the club into your unit. So again, that's what I hope, or I think may have been the confusion here.
Hi, Dan. Theodora Saul. Hi. I think that you might have printed out the wrong booklet, and you might want to think about a new booklet, the right one for tomorrow night, because the language in here, which says things like the place to be, you'll want to live here, is a hard sell, and I'm not sure why you would have chosen to give us this promotional brochure for current residents of Hampshire, although I'm sure there are some present in the room, or other potential for maybe a real estate conference or something where there are people who are looking for this sort of lifestyle. Instead, this is a civic community, a civic presentation, and I feel that you've given us this for sale brochure, and I very much agree with Celia, Celia, right. But I want to say it in a microcosm, as I also will take Celia's recommendation to pay attention to the planning board tomorrow night, which is that the devil is in the details. And I just want to say one small thing, which is that I turned 56 on Friday, and thank you very much, I have a freshman and a junior at Mamaroneck High School. So I don't think that you're legally permitted to exclude people because they have children who are over 55, but I would just like to say that I have plenty of friends who are over 50 and over 55 with kids, because that's how things are these days. And I just would like people to pay attention to even small details like that. This is not my subject. Land use is not my topic. But the little thing I can say is that I'm over 55 and I have 2 kids in the school system.
Just one clarification. Yes, Celia, I am in real estate, but my first interest is where I live and what I think is best for the community. When I am talking about the condominium plan, what I'm thinking is, if as of right, they are zoned and able to do this with the single-family homes, if we are stuck with having to build something on Hampshire, because of course I'd love to see Hampshire just stay open space like that and not have to have any development there.
That's why you should come tomorrow night to find
Right.
out if in fact that's a viable proposal.
Fine, okay, so that's all I wanted to clarify, that, if when a property owner has property and they are going to eventually let them do something, then I think we have to choose the thing that we feel has the least impact and will be the best, and also try to negotiate for the community things like a kayak, a place where we can launch boats, some access to the water, whatever we can negotiate for ourselves, that's all.
I just want to make a comment. I don't have a I don't have a comment. I just want to say that sustainability seems to be should be the highest priority right now in our community. We live cheek by jowl, and sustainability is such an important issue. Hampshire is such an important flood mitigation for the village of Mamaroneck. I just think that has to be a major consideration as you go forward.
No other questions? Whoa.
Dan, I'm curious, and you may not want to answer this question, but if you've thought of a third plan, what's sort of the minimum number of housing units that you need to build to come out okay on this project?
The answer is we've run different scenarios, and we continue to do so. Just like when we were asked to take a look at reducing the number of condos by the original board, we did, and we reduced it to, I think it was about 90. About 90, we came down. And a lot of it had to do with being able to maintain the services at the condo that we think the people who bought there would actually expect. So that was really a lot of the analysis that we did. In terms of looking at the plans, really from an as-of-right standpoint, we really focused on what we can reasonably expect to contain or put on that site without negatively impacting or making it impossible to build. So in other words, there is a break point, and we've gone under that break point with this design that we've created. Did I answer your question, or? Okay.
I'm still trying to imagine all of those trucks bringing all of that land coming in and all that building up. And, it's a huge amount of land that you're building up there. And it's hard to imagine how you could really do it. Mike, yeah, that's my question. I mean, you said it was going to be off-peak.
No. Right, when they talk about off-peak, they're talking about outside of peak traffic hours, not past normal business or normal development hours. They wouldn't be middle-of-the-night deliveries to it. And there's also creative ways which we've just begun to look at in terms of delivering fill to the site. So again, this is just something that we're beginning the process of. But we understand that, and we agree with you.
In terms of the length of construction time, what are the differences between that plan and that plan?
This, for the condo plan, should be about 18 months of construction. And for this plan, it's probably 5 to 6 years of ongoing construction. Yes?
Is there any possibility that you could build in subsidized housing for 1 or 2 units?
We haven't been asked, but yes.
Many localities have new regulations concerning affordable housing, up to 10%. Is that one of the ingredients in this recipe?
To date, we haven't had any dialogue. We haven't been asked to do it. I don't believe this is a target area for affordable housing, but Yeah, if it's an obligation, we absolutely accept it, sure.
Hey, Jenny. My name is Stu Seltz. I'm a resident in Orienta. I have a question for you. One option I wanted to get your comment on. In looking at the brochure, the last page, the last visual, lays out 6 options. And it's very hard to see because it's very fine print. But the one on the furthest to the right is my favorite because it says no development. And I know we've had a lot of hearings, a lot of different discussions about this. And the reason is, A, that it's great open space. And whenever you do development, as you'll hear tomorrow night, a lot of issues, including the things that Sylvia has mentioned. But, oh, thank you. Blown up. That's good. Right. So I'm looking at the one way to the right. So the key point also is that I hear that good things are happening at Hampshire Country Club. That because, was it Elmwood that went out of business, that Hampshire has 50+ new members, and good things. So I just wanted to put a plug in for the option G, way on the right, which is no development. So that would be my friend. Here you go.
Just to, the lawyer got up, right? So the legal point is that's the no action alternative, which is a required part of any SEQA review. The purpose of it is to identify the baseline, and then you can then evaluate the differences between alternatives. So you'll see that no action alternative in every single environmental impact statement there is in New York State. Obviously, any alternative needs to be consistent with the purposes and goals of the applicant, and so I don't want to get into the niceties of that. But
okay, and then the last comment, just again about the flooding, because I know I was looking at the golf course just yesterday or Sunday when there was light rain, and again, the flooding is still there after all these years that they're still flooding. I was just looking at the 4th hole fairway, and that was surprising to see. So we know that it's, I think it's under sea level and so forth. And a lot of the houses are, like ours, are like 2 feet above sea level. So a lot of it, there would be some significant impact by some of the plans that you are recommending. We'll see you tomorrow night.
it's all in the EIS. Take a look in there. Yes.
I'm a Larchmont resident with elementary school age children, and I appreciate the acute need for empty nester housing, and I also appreciate the acute situation in the elementary schools. One thing the community does not have is an elementary school on that side of the Boston Post Road, and I wonder if in any of this acreage, if we could find space for another elementary school and solve that need as well. I'll leave that up to Dr. Schaps.
Nice. Everyone's looking at me.
Last call.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. This timing is perfect because tomorrow, if you have further questions and want to hear from the village officials on this as well, please come to the meeting. I encourage everybody to come, as others have said. I also want to encourage you to come to our next meeting, which is on March 20th, where we're going to address the impact of current health care legislation on our community, how you buy insurance now, and what other impact there is on various segments of our community. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.